Internet. My name is Ryan Ingram, and welcome to a live question and answer, or a Q&A, as some people call it. Pretty excited today. Any day now, we should be having our fourth kid. So we thought for sure that he was going to come last week, but he did not. So that explains my absence on all of these videos lately. But nonetheless, once this baby arrives and is situated, I'll be back to posting a lot more regularly. So we have had a few people leave tons of questions in our comments. So I'm looking forward to going through and answering those. And we already have a few questions here in this chat as well. And by a few, I suppose I mean one. So let's go there as well. So the first one, John Hollywood, car flipping architect. That sounds really cool. Good morning, Ryan. Can you walk through the process, start to finish, of a wholesale deal where you are, one, buying the home from a seller, and two, selling the rights to the contract to an investor? Well, John Hollywood, car flipping architect, I'm not so sure that I can do that. Buying the home from a seller. Selling the rights to the contract to an investor. So I have never wholesaled a property, John Hollywood, car flipping architect. I have only purchased properties from wholesalers. So I can tell you from a buyer's side what purchasing a home from a wholesaler looks like. And then I could also comment briefly on the process that they use in order to buy a property from a seller, but I don't have any experience in being a wholesaler. I haven't even really sold any properties. All of the properties, the rentals that we have acquired so far, we have kept all of them. So the only two properties I have ever sold are the first home that I ever purchased in North Carolina and the home that I built when I was still living in North Carolina. And that was quite some time ago. As far as buying the home from a seller, I think that kind of falls in line with just coming to an agreement between the seller, the person that owns the home, and you. So, I mean, in real estate, it's super creative. Traditionally, I think if you were just to start typing stuff in or think about buying properties, then a lot of people think that realtors are necessary in order to invest in real estate, and that's really not true. And the deeper that I get into real estate investing, the fewer and fewer properties that I've ever used realtors on becomes. I think I worded that sentence horribly, but I'm just saying I don't use realtors often, and I don't necessarily think it's necessary to use realtors. I think realtors are good for buying primary homes to live in, but in the markets that I'm in Ohio, when properties are selling for $40,000, $50,000 or less, then realtors really struggle making a decent amount of money or making enough money on those transactions to make it worthwhile. So really buying a home from a seller is just two people coming to an agreement and then putting the appropriate paperwork in place. There are generic purchase sale agreements that you can find online that just kind of outlines your general kind of boilerplate document that says how much you'll pay for the home, when you expect to close, the fact that the title will be clean upon transfer, any owed taxes will be paid prior to transfer. It'll outline what title company you're using to close the property and any sort of earnest money deposits and any sort of contingencies. So normally what I do is I make my contracts contingent upon me walking through the property just so I can get in there and look at everything. And that's just because I have paid for so many inspections already and I've been attached at the inspector's hip while he was doing it. So I kind of do my own light inspection on the property. I really just hit all the high ticket items, the plumbing, the electric, the roof, the furnace, air conditioning, water heater, all of those things. So sorry, I don't have any better answers for that. Yeah, I'm no wholesaler, so that's tough. All right, let's see. Let me go over to YouTube and try not to mess up this stream. and figure out if I can go through the comments that have been left over this past week on some of my videos, because I've got some phenomenal questions that came in, especially from Lewis Porter. Lewis Porter asked a bunch of really good questions. So I do not know how to share my screen, but on one of the videos that I recorded, someone named Esteban Peralta asked, Mr. Ingram, do you only invest in your state? Yes, Esteban, that is true. All of the properties that I own are in Ohio. I had a few more comments about PropStream and about how PropStream is really solid for getting tons of information on properties. So I really need to look into PropStream, learn more about it. Okay, so Lewis Porter says you talk about 80 plus rentals that you currently own, but what was it like getting your first 5 or 10 properties? Can you talk about that process, since I'm getting that is where most people who watch your channel are? So 80 plus rentals is what we currently own. The first 5 or 10 properties, and talking about that process. So buying the first 5 to 10 properties for us was extraordinarily rough. And when I say rough, I mean, it's a lot easier once you pass like the 10 to 15 property threshold. So we purchased a property or a package of 12 properties right at when we had 8 properties. No, we purchased a package of 13 properties when we had 8 properties. So we went from 8 properties to 21 properties. We didn't have any days of 10 plus property, 10 to 20 property experience. We went straight from 8 to 21. And that was a real blessing. And when we had 8 or fewer properties, this is where we kind of really realized, on this channel, I talk a lot about capital expenditures and repairs and maintenance, and how I disagree with how those are calculated from the majority of people. And the reason for that is whenever I had 8 properties, my brother and I would, throughout the month, regularly put in more and more of our money in order to handle any of the things that went wrong with those 8 properties. Now, at the time, we were also using property management, so we were a little bit removed from the day-to-day, but there were regularly repairs, maintenance, capital expenditure items that needed to be addressed that the income from these properties did not produce. So once we hit the 21 property range, that is when we noticed that our monthly income increased in a manner where the income from the rental properties was sufficient to sustain the repairs, the maintenance, and the capital expenditures that arose throughout the course of that month. So we went from regularly putting in all of our own money in order to keep the rental properties afloat, to having money left over at the end of the month after all the repairs, maintenance, and all of those items have been addressed. Good morning, Tom. 3D of Tom. So I think if you have fewer than 10 properties, I think the capital expenditures and the repairs maintenance, just throwing 10% in there, I think that's good in theory. But from a practical perspective, I do not believe that that is sufficient to actually handle everything it is that you... I don't need that disclaimer yet because I'm not talking about anything legal or professional, but you should definitely seek professional counsel prior to taking any action on anything that I say here, because I'm just a guy making videos on the internet that has a rental property or two. Nobody that you should take professional advice from. Let's see here. So thanks, Lewis Porter, for asking that question. I probably should make a few videos about the first 5 or 10 properties that we got, because I mean, that is really where we molded the majority of our opinion. And we realized that, yes, over the long term, we're going to make a tremendous amount of money off the 8 properties that we had. But on a monthly basis, all of the maintenance items were really kind of a high percentage of our income just because we had so few properties. So it's no different than insurance companies and the way that they work. It would be absolutely impossible for you to write as an insurance company, for you to provide insurance coverage on one vehicle. It would be impossible for you to charge the owner of that vehicle enough per month to cover anything that could possibly go wrong with that vehicle. However, if you start collecting premiums on monthly premiums from 10,000 car owners, then presumably the law of large numbers, the law of averages, statistics really come into play. And of those 10,000 vehicles that you're collecting monthly premiums from, a very small percentage of those will have incidents where insurance needs to pay anything out. So it's no different in these single family properties. I view it a lot like insurance, in that you have to have a lot of them in order to sustain them. I hope that makes sense. All right. If you just got into this chat, go ahead and throw some questions up. Joseph Wilson, good morning. And if my memory serves me correctly, you just purchased your first property. How's the rehabs coming along? What was the cost of your first 3 rental properties? How did you find them? How did you finance them? And how did you evaluate the risk on them before you bought them? So the last question, let me answer that. Mitigate evaluating risk on them before I purchased them. I spent about 5 to 7 months, day in, day out, listening to real estate investing books, podcasts, and talking to other people that invested in real estate. And I was a sponge, and I like to still think that I am a sponge, and I like to read tons of books. So there's no real way to mitigate or evaluate risk before you buy something in a way that's like foolproof. So there's always going to be risk. It can be mitigated by not buying a property, by doing some due diligence. It's like your inspections, your research on the area, things like that. But at some point, you're not going to be ready, but you still just need to go ahead and pull the trigger because, I take it back to the Teddy Roosevelt Man in the Arena speech. Sitting on the sidelines is not a good long-term play. So at some point, you just have to commit to taking action and then constantly reassessing, pivoting, and making changes as you go. But there's never going to be an ideal time to start. And then the cost of our first 3 rental properties, the first one we bought was $35,000. We paid for that in cash. So we had $35,000 from the homes that we sold from North Carolina when we moved up here to Ohio. We bought those. We paid cash. That was a duplex. It was rented out for about $1,000 per month. And that was when I learned a hard lesson about property management companies. There was one in place, and I purchased it really late in the month. I was also moving from North Carolina to Ohio at the time, so I did not have the capacity, the bandwidth, or the knowledge in order to figure out all of the things that I needed to do logistically prior to the start of the following month. So I actually asked the existing property management to stay in place, and they burned me up. They nickel and dimed me to no end. So even though they were collecting $1,000 per month, I only saw probably about $130 per month from that property. So I was getting burnt up on management fees. And the way that they structured everything is they had it to where each time the tenant called, a minimum service charge of $45 was assessed. And I had one lady who was very much so a chatty Cathy, and she may have not even needed anything, but still called in, which resulted in that charge. They once also charged me $45 for delivering a piece of mail, and the United States Postal Service, they could do it for a lot cheaper than that, just 45 cents. And it wasn't one of these things that required things to be posted, like entry or eviction or a 3-day notice. It wasn't any of those things. It was just like a a regular maintenance thing that they were just alerting them that that it would be happening soon. So I was very frustrated about that. The second rental property that we purchased, the first 4 happened pretty quickly, all within like 5 or 6 months. The second property that I purchased was for $28,000. It was on the MLS. We put a $7,000 down payment down. I actually recorded a video on the first duplex that I purchased when I went through all of the numbers. If you want to go over to the Deals Explained playlist, then I really flesh those out in a lot more detail. And also the second property that I purchased, that video that I did, I think it's called When Real Estate Clicked for Me. Let's see if I could find that really quick, where I go through this second property that I did in a bunch of detail. There you go. I just put it in the chat. So the first 2 were right off the MLS, and the third, I believe, was also on the MLS. So the first 3 properties that I purchased were all off the MLS, and the first, except for the first one, because when I bought that one in cash, $35,000, and to only have like $130 per month return on that, I really wasn't making any money. So I think on my first tax return, that rental property, I only showed about $1,800 worth of income from that property. And on a $35,000 investment, $1,800 is very poor. So I was not a fan of that. And then I realized, even though I was coming hot and heavy off the Dave Ramsey train of never going into debt ever again, or never borrowing money for any circumstances ever, I really realized that it was going to take me a very long time to build up a sizable real estate investing portfolio if I were to continually do everything in cash. So while I was buying the other 3 or 4 properties, I converted all of my retirement savings into a self-directed IRA and actually lent money to other people, as I was still trying to figure out, is debt something that I want to take on? So I lent money out to other people at 10%. And that didn't go horribly. That went very well. And that kind of sort of satisfied the Dave Ramsey side of me of never wanting to go into debt again. But then, as I just shared this one video, after I bought that second property and only put $7,000 down on a $28,000 property, this property was recently rehabbed. It needed no work. It was a very, very good deal. And that one rented out for like, I think $770. So the mortgage payment on that was about $112 per month. So the spread was $770 minus $112 plus all of the other, insurance taxes, which were both less than $100 per month. So there's a giant spread there. And that's when I really realized, like, if I could repeat that process over and over again, then how many times could I do that before it just became too much? At what point would I be uncomfortable with that? And ultimately, I don't think there is a real answer to that. So I would do it as many times as I possibly can and hand, what's that saying? Like head over shoulders or whatever. Using leverage against real estate that produces cash is better than buying it outright in cash, in my opinion, for what I was trying to do. If you just want to take tax losses, or if you are only investing in real estate as a for like the tax benefits, then perhaps you would be better off. If you're a really high income earner or you have a very high net worth and you don't want to increase your risk at all, but you want to lower your taxable income, then buying real estate in cash may be a good choice for you. But if you are attempting to grow a real estate investing portfolio, then leverage is your friend. And if you want to be larger sooner than later, then you should probably use leverage. All right. Are there tax advantages to put the properties in your name as opposed to in a company name or vice versa? No. So if you are putting properties into an LLC, likely it's an S Corp, which will flow directly to you. So at the end of the year, whatever the LLC profited or lost would go straight to your tax return. Let me put that disclaimer up here because I really don't know. I'm not a CPA. But from the way that sounds, no, it's going to flow to you at some point anyway. So whether it's in your personal name or an LLC, there aren't any real differences or distinctions there unless there are different owners of the LLC. So if you are 100% owner of the LLC, then there's truly no difference because it's going to flow right to you anyway. And if you are like 50% owner of the LLC, then let's say your company lost $2,000, then only $1,000 of that would roll to your personal taxes at the end of the year. But if you're 100% owner, everything will flow to you normally. So this is the link that I shared. Let's see here. What do you think of all-in-one companies, property management, realtor, contractor, all in-house versus taking the time to find individual team members to work with? Good morning to you as well, Jafan. I really think this depends on where you're at in life. I think if you want to be super duper hands off, if you are out of state, if you want nothing to do with these properties at all, if you are a high income earner and want to focus on the things that make you a high income, then perhaps one of these all-in-one companies will be good for you. But I have a sneaky suspicion that once you were to start looking into the books of these all-in-one companies, you could probably save an extraordinary amount of money doing things yourself, taking the time to do that. So it really depends on how much time you have available and how much money you want to make. If you have an excess of capital and just want to buy real estate for the long-term benefits, like the appreciation, the tax benefits, and the principal pay down, and you really don't care much about the cash flow, then you're probably safe to go to one of these all-in-one companies. But if you really want the cash flow along with the other things, then it would probably benefit you if you have the time to do everything yourself. So I have shared that my brother and I have recently taken over property management, and on average, I would say we spend 5 to 10 hours per week each on the property management tasks. So we have freed up probably $5,000 to $7,000 of cash flow on a monthly basis. So in our situation, where we have flexible enough schedules where we can put in the 5 to 10 hours per week in order to do this, it makes sense for us. And since we have been hands-on the rehab process, since we already have the contractor teams, for us, it makes sense. If you're starting from the ground up, putting together contractor teams, I really wouldn't even, I don't like that you put realtors in there. I don't really think, realtors, contractors and property management are probably the biggest thing. I think you can really get away with not having a dedicated realtor or a quote unquote realtor on your team, but finding good contractors and finding good property management is pretty time consuming. So it really just comes down to how much time you have and what you're trying to accomplish with your life. Good morning, Lewis Porter. Man, rewatch this. I just answered one of your questions. Thanks for pointing out the 5 to 10 properties and having me talk about that. No baby yet. My wife issued a false alarm on Thursday or Friday. She was convinced that the baby was going to show up last week, and it did not. So my mom is in town from North Carolina. So I'm excited about that. She's been tons of help. And the baby, I'm hoping it would make my day phenomenal if during this live stream, my wife says, it's time, here comes the baby. But truly, any second, man. No, she did not send me a text message that said that. I had to check just in case. Hello, Internet. Hello, Simo. Thanks for coming out, man. Oh, Lewis, you had a question as well. Have you done any subject to deals? No, I have not. My thoughts on subject to deals are that if you have the appropriate amount of capital and resources, then it is probably always better to pay off the person rather than taking a property subject to. I really struggle with finding a scenario that would benefit the seller to do a subject to, because they are taking on and retaining all of the liability in that transaction. If you're just starting and you have very limited resources, then I totally see how it's a win for the investor that is interested in doing subject to deals. But I think it makes for a much cleaner transaction if you don't do subject to properties and you just buy them outright from the person that wants to sell it. That's my stance. How much rehab, if any, did you spend on your first 3 rental properties? None. I do not think it is a good idea for someone to go just jump into real estate investing and take on rentals rehabs, because I would say contractors and capital are the 2 biggest obstacles when you're getting started in real estate investing. Actually, I think capital and contractors are the biggest issue with real estate investing as a whole. I think those are the most limiting factors in this entire industry. So if you're brand new, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure if you have 0 experience and you buy a property that's going to cost a lot of money to rehab, and you're going to put all of the faith into the contractors to do that rehab well. Generally, lenders, either hard money or traditional, want to see that you have some sort of experience in real estate on your when they lend you money, especially if rehab's involved. So I also wouldn't advise, if you had your own capital, to necessarily dump it into a property that needs a bunch of work if you have no experience in seeing contractors from start to finish. We did not do our first big rehab project until we had 21 properties. And that property we got for free. So it was really tough to say no to that one. But we had to replace all of the floor joists, all of the subfloor, replumb and rewire the entire house. So that was a massive, massive rehab. And I would not have felt comfortable doing that as one of my first few properties. And I'm not saying it couldn't be done. You could definitely do it without any experience in overseeing contractors, but it's going to be really difficult, not fun, probably. And I think the potential upside is far outweighed by all of the things that could go wrong between capital, contractors, and lack of experience. So in good faith, I cannot say that buying a property that is in need of a gross amount of rehab is a good idea for anyone's first couple of properties, unless you have some sort of background in construction or you've seen other people do it. Have you seen conventional loans where you can make a down payment for less than 20%? Yes. One of the local credit unions, and I think they're up your way too, Right Pac Credit Union. We almost used them for a few deals, and they said that we could put down as little as 15% for the down payment on a rental property, but that was going to trigger the PMI, private mortgage insurance. And that, on one of these smaller, lower valued properties, I think it came out to be like an extra $50 or $60 per month. So it's not a big deal, but it will definitely throw off your numbers. And if we're talking about a $50,000 property, then 5% more is $2,500. So I think just shelling out an additional $2,500 compared to an extra $50 to $60 per month that you will carry for the next several years until you pay down more than 20%. I think that's a bad idea. JJ, man, I get so happy when I see your name come across the screen. You're always there, man, and you're always issuing really short but sweet comments. I really appreciate it. You've already made my Friday 100 times better. Thanks for all your wisdom, knowledge, and honesty. Thank you, Chris Render. And thanks for that surprised face of a picture. That's a really good picture. Do you have any Airbnbs? No. Would you even get into Airbnbs if you are not in it? No. Oh, man. I would much rather have any rental properties that just take a few hours per month. Okay, I had a good conversation with somebody that is very experienced in the Airbnb space recently, and he really expressed all of the things that I had sneaky suspicions of that I didn't necessarily hear anyone talking about. So all of the people that want to talk about how much money they make doing Airbnb, totally, I bet they do. But like, let's say we have a rental property that normally rents out for $800 per month, and our expenses are $400 per month. So we have $400 a month left over at the end of the month. With our 80 rental properties, so I do all the property management side of things. My brother does all of the financial talkings and dealings with the banks and whatnot. So actually, like boots on the ground, problems being solved for the residents and for the properties, that stuff is on me. And I spend, like I said earlier, about 5 to 10 hours per week handling those types of things. And generally, my involvement is answering questions that residents might have, and then lining up contractors to go out to the properties to fix whatever it is that needs to be fixed. So for 5 to 10 hours a week, so let's say that is 40 hours a month maximum is how much I put into our 80 plus property portfolio. So presumably, just doing some quick math, on average, that means I spend about 30 minutes. Did I do that math right? Somebody help me out in the comments. 80 plus properties, 40 hours a month, 30 minutes per property. Yeah, that's good round numbers per month. Whereas if you were to do Airbnb, you are now responsible for each time somebody needs to stay in the property again. So each time you have a turn, you have to clean it and do all of these things. And the guy that I had that has a bunch of experience in the Airbnb space, one of the things that he shared with me in the comment, or not in the comments, but in the conversation, was he said, if you think about it, take the most difficult part of real estate investing, finding the residents, handling problems, and then doing the property turns, the turns on the property. Those are the 3 most difficult things about the real estate investing, like day-to-day property management side of things, the most time intensive. So now if you switch to an Airbnb model, then you are potentially experiencing those things on a daily basis. So you could potentially go from, 30 minutes a month per rental property to, let's just for exaggeration's sake, let's say it doubles and now it is an hour or even 2 hours per month on that same property. The $400 per month compared to the $1,500 per month. So let's say on an Airbnb, you start making $1,500 per month. Is that extra $1,100 scalable and worth it, or even guaranteed? So best case scenario, you make an extra $1,100, but you are drastically increasing the amount of difficulty and time that you're putting into it. So after that unbearable tangent where even I have lost myself, I think Lewis Porter Jr., I would say, no, I'm not interested in it, because I'm not interested in the time. And I think when people say and talk about this Airbnb stuff, I think they are forgetting to pay themselves an appropriate amount of money for their time compared to the extra money that they're making. That was long. I'm sorry. I hope that was helpful to anybody but Lewis Porter. Lewis Porter, I'm sure that was helpful for you. How do I go about getting my property appraisal? I believe the value has increased based on what is selling in my neighborhood. You can call a third party appraisal. You can like go through a phone book and find somebody. But if you are looking to refinance one of your properties, I would really suggest that you contact your bank or whatever bank you are probably going to refinance your property with, because banks are tricky. They make their own rules. And just because you purchased an appraisal from a third party appraiser doesn't mean that they're going to accept it. So I would highly recommend that you make sure that if you are going to pay for something, I think it's like $450, $500 here in Ohio. That's how much an appraisal costs. I would definitely just double check before you spend your money on that to see if the bank would even accept it, because chances are the banks probably want one of the appraisers that they are familiar with to do the appraisal. Being told no in lending once you surpass the traditional convention loan process. What tips would you recommend when structuring your application when 2 years of property performance will not suffice? Man, I think if you are being told no in lending, then you're probably on the right track. Real estate investors, man, the industry attracts a very particular person, and like these single family to four family rental properties, us real estate investors, very much so birds of a feather. I think very seldom does somebody with like an 850 credit score, a high earning W-2 job, one day wake up and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a massive real estate investing portfolio. And I think the two are just at such opposite ends of the spectrum. I think if you have a really good credit score and you have a really good income, then you are likely a high income earner that if you double down on what you're good at or start freelancing what you're good at, you are going to make more money at a rate that is faster than the slow accumulation of rental properties. So I have found that like this portfolio that I have built, when I talk to my high income earning friends, they are not at all appealed to what I'm doing because it's such a slow moving thing. And we're not really going to see results for a very long time. However, they kind of have these golden handcuff things. They are capable of doing something that is a high value task and get immediate payment for that, which is ideal. And then let's say that one of these people, one of these unicorns, do decide to get into real estate investing. Their high credit score is going to immediately lower itself because of the number of inquiries, which I think is either 10 or 15% of your overall credit score, and then the average age of the account. So let's say you're a high income earner and you've got 3 or 4 credit cards that you've had for a really long time. Well, your credit score is pretty high because you have 3 or 4 credit accounts that have been open for a really long time. And because you are a high income earner that has no need for credit cards or credit, you probably have like a house, maybe a car. So your inquiries are very low because you're pretty self-sustaining. And at the end of the month, you put all of your money into some sort of like, liquid asset account, like the stock market or whatnot. Well, then you start investing in rental properties, and now you have the means to buy 10 properties. Well, for all 10 of those properties, your credit is going to be inquired upon. And for each of those 10 properties that you take a loan out on, you will have a new line of credit. So your average age of credit accounts will drastically decrease. And I think those two alone are sufficient to take an 800 score closer to a 700 score. So at that point, even if you were prior like a perfect credit score, high income having individual, after you buy 10 properties, you're going to be an average credit score, high debt to income type individual. So the way that the bank approaches you and treats you is going to be drastically different. And I honestly think that I'll stop myself. Okay, so I never answered your question, 3747. Man, I must be in a horrible headspace today. It's been 40 minutes, and I feel like I've gone on so many tangents that have that aren't even related to the question being asked. And that entire time, I had 37's thing up, so you guys couldn't even see my. I was like peeking out from over a ledge. Sorry about that. Yeah. Being told no, it's going to happen often, even if you are perfect in every way, shape, or form. Once you dip your toes into the waters of real estate investing, lenders are going to dry up around you, and very seldom are people going to want to deal with you. So I mentioned that I spend 5 or 10 hours a week on the property management side, and my brother spends 5 to 10 hours a week just talking to banks, just trying to find someone that's willing to say yes. I think every day that we talk, every day that my brother and I talk, we probably discuss at least 1 or 2 lenders that have recently told us no. So we constantly have applications out. We constantly get these inquiries on our credit, and we are pretty well-to-do people. Like both of us, before we got into this, had very high credit scores. So yeah, it's a eater, man. The real estate industry, they eat up good credit scores and they make them bad. I think I spoke with one lender that often does loans to real estate investors. And he said, if you are a real estate investor and you have a 720 on your credit score, then that is equivalent to a non-real estate investor's 800 score. But getting your cash flow to go up almost, I mean, yeah, it is nice going back to Airbnb, but at the same time, how much additional time are you going to put in? How many additional headaches are you going to have? And is that scalable? In some markets, Airbnb might be the better option. If you don't have the ability to get multiple properties to equal the cash flow with like half the work. So let's say you're making $1,500 per month, and the $400 per month example that I was using. Is it easier for you to buy 4 more properties, or is it easier for you to take your one property and turn it into an Airbnb? If depending on what market you live in, Airbnb might be the better option. But it is a lot more time and labor intensive. And I don't feel like the people that are bragging about their Airbnb returns are appropriately rewarding themselves for their time. And what I would be interested to see is what your true dollar per hour rate is, and what's your average time that a contractor or cleaner stays with you, because I've heard that those are super duper high turnover. Workers and nurses, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a ideal. Those are definitely ideal people. What I really like is providing rental properties to nurses. Go through a phone book. They still have those in Dayton? Do they? Did I say something about the phone book? Man, I'm up here blabbering away. You know what? A phone book. Yeah. I was going to try to work in a funny thing about VHS, but I couldn't do it. One of the Jim Rohn audiobooks that I was listening to lately mentioned, no, it was one of the Earl Nightingale things. On the other side of the cassette tape, you will find. That's what they said. And I was like, wow, that's funny. That's funny. How far we've come. Hey, Brown Sugar. 111. When I was in law enforcement, my first call sign was 111. Charlie 111. That was my radio name. So good username. Me in South Florida, Airbnb Heave. Heaven, Airbnb Heaven, South Florida. That makes sense. Oh, there you go. You did. I did mention a phone book. Yeah. Well, I'll probably mention again once this live stream goes over to the other side of the cassette tape. What's your long-term strategy on the first 3 rental properties you purchased? Man, I think this is getting a little bit too nuanced. I think the first three rental properties that we purchased, the long-term strategy was no different than like our current long-term strategy, which is buy as many as we can and hold them for as long as we can and refinance them as often as we can and make as much money as we can off the cash flow and get them to appreciate as much as we can. I think if you put in enough time and thought on the forefront, in theory, your investing strategy for your first several properties will be the same as your investing strategy when you reach 100 properties. And I think any good long-term plan doesn't change too often. It evolves perhaps, but I don't think change. Like I would say, like all the large companies, the Microsofts and Amazons, sure, they've pivoted, they've adapted, but overall, their initial strategy is probably still intact. And the way that we went about everything, I mean, our initial strategy was a 15-year strategy. So our initial strategy was to accumulate enough rental properties in order to pay for our 4 to 5 kids in college at the same time. So our initial strategy was 15 years. The heart of that is the same, but now we have expanded to, okay, let's try and pay for more things than just their college. Let's create something so large that we can kind of also give them jobs when they're ready to work. Man, I hit the bottom of the comments. Let me see if I can go find some more of Lewis Porter Jr.'s comments that he left, because he left a few good ones. And so far, I only touched on the 5 to 10 ones. 5 to 10 properties. At what point did you stop accounting for CapEx, repairs, etc.? When we realized that we had 8 rental properties, and every month my brother and I got together to figure out how much each of us needed to put into the business to keep it afloat. And then we went straight from 8 properties to 21 properties. And 21 properties is really when we both went, oh, I see. This makes sense. Because when we bought that package of 13, our gross rental income jumped up by like $700 per month. A lot of the properties that we bought in that 13 property package were grossly under rent, and they still are, because we don't really raise rent on long-term tenants because we're such nice fellas. But that extra $7,000 per month of gross monthly income really mixed with the 8 property gross income that we already had, I mean, we could now replace a roof any given month without putting any of our own money into the business. But man, I tell you what, those first 8 properties, it's like, you see companies that like start and they have like nothing in their office, and they're like scratching up and like turning over couch cushions to figure out how they're going to keep the lights on the next month. With 8 rental properties, that's what we felt like. Now, I got one comment this past week. Let me tell you, Loot, L-U-T, San Pedro. Loot San Pedro said, "You are so informative and executed it like a genius pro. Thank you, Professor. And you look like a cute teddy bear." Oh, the beard makes me look fluffy, huh? Look at that, Will Ingram. Hey, Will, what's one of the favorite deals you've done? What's one of the favorite deals you've done, buddy? This firehouse that we're doing right now, I haven't done an update on it in quite some time because we are really rushing one of our projects. that's actually where I'm headed after this. Is the lady wants to move in today, the new resident there, and it is just, man, the last 5 to 10% on any large rehab project is the worst. It is the most time intensive, and those last details really make or break an entire rehab, and really lets you know how good of a contractor you hired. So the one that I have doing this project, he's also doing the firehouse, and we put the firehouse on the back burner so that we could finish this one rehab project that we have underway at the moment. But I would say the firehouse is probably one of my favorite deals that we've done. We bought it for 10 grand. And if I play all my cards right, we can rehab it for 35, 40 grand. And the house will be worth about 110,000. I also like it because as somebody who is about to have entirely too many kids, so we're about to have our 4th kid, and my oldest is 3 still until January, so he's about to be 4. So as someone that has a growing family, our firehouse is 5 bedrooms, 2 bath. It just seems like a really good home, and it's a home that I would happily live in. So one of the things that I reflect on often with my wife, with you, Will, is each time we buy a property, our rock bottom gets a little bit less rocky. So let's say something were to happen and we needed to, for whatever reason, couldn't pay our bills at our house, then man, one of these rental properties, almost any of them, are phenomenal alternatives. We have a really solid portfolio. Man, it's so much fun that you came on here. I need to figure out how to get you in here. It would be fun to do a live stream with you as well. That way you could answer this question. The largest challenge or failure that you had since you've been doing this? That's a great question, Al. So I say this every single week and probably every time that I'm talking to a new investor. And that is that the one thing that I did very well was I surrounded myself with a group of like-minded people that were more experienced than I was. I got in good graces and on good terms with several people that have really large portfolios. And each time I find myself in a situation where I have no idea what I'm doing and I need help, I've got this beautiful informal board of directors that I can reach out to help me make decisions. So the one thing that I really did right is not rely on my own knowledge solely, and that I have surrounded myself with like-minded, high-achieving, lofty goal-setting people. So if you do not have that, I would say you should do that. And then I would say that these challenges and failures, I'm not going to say they go away. We all have challenges and failures, but the gravitas, so to speak, of those challenges and failures kind of goes away or lessens when you first get the counsel and insight of people wiser than yourself. So that's the whole reason that I started this mastermind group that I did. If you're interested in that at all, it is seek-wisdom.com/join. Let me see if I can. Nope. Let me do that. And this is just a like-minded group of dudes that we meet once a week for an hour. There we go. seekwisdom.com/join. seek-wisdom.com/join. Phenomenal group, man. I'm so thrilled. We've got about 18 guys in there so far, and there's 2 groups. There's a Tuesday group and a Monday group. And man, the synergy, these guys setting lofty goals for themselves, following through, forming deep relationships with other like-minded people that also set really good goals for each other and hold each other accountable for actually like doing the things that they say they're going to do. I actually had one of the guys reach out to me this morning, and he said, man, I want to thank you for this mastermind because I've gotten more done this week than I normally get done in multiple months. So that made me feel really good. Other than that, I've lost like 30 grand trusting contractors. All of the biggest failures that I have done so far have been from contractors. So I'm not sure why I did this. Hindsight 2020. I definitely did not consult my informal board of directors before I did this, but I paid 2 separate contractors in full before the job was even started. That's an exaggeration. I paid them before they actually completed the work, but one of them was in draws, and the other one was just when the rough-in was complete on the electric, and neither of those turned out well. It has been like pulling teeth to get either of them to show back up and finish the work, and then one of them just stopped showing up and responding altogether. So now I had to hire out the remaining tasks left. So, I mean, fortunately, and that's the cool thing about real estate investing, the deals, I purchased them right on the front end. So while I experienced like a $30,000 deficit, I'm not necessarily to the point where we would lose money because of those 2 contractors, because we had so much equity in the properties because we bought them well. So now we're going to break even instead of have any equity left in the property. But nonetheless, I think it was a learning experience. And then this past week, I actually, man, Al, I'm answering this question very well. You're welcome. How long has this been? So we just hit the 1 hour mark. Okay. 56 minutes and 41 seconds, 19 people are watching, so I must be doing something okay. You know what, though, guys? I dream about the day that we're going to have like 100, 200 people on the live stream. But if I don't get better about rambling and going on tangents that aren't even the questions that you all asked, that day will never come. So I'm gonna tighten it up right now. So this past week, I realized that I made about $15,000 worth of mistakes. And I will show you both of those mistakes. I'll tell you those. So the first one was with the roof. I have accidentally spread myself a little bit too thin lately. And while I was out at this property, I looked at it. It was contingent upon the walkthrough. Even though I was there looking at stuff, I wasn't there and I wasn't present, and I had a bunch of other things going on mentally, and I was just kind of going through the motions. Well, I submitted the insurance application on the policy once we closed on it, and the insurance person came back and said, man, this roof looks really rough. What's going on with it? We're not going to cover this roof. And I said, what? The roof is new. And I overlooked some areas that I should have seen where they were a little bit suspect. And the top layer of this roof is new. It's very new. But there are 3 layers under that roof that are not new. And the most recent layer, the nails that were used weren't long enough to even hit the decking. So I've got shingle covered shingles at this point on the roof. So if I were even paying half as much attention as I should have been, then I would have seen these suspect areas that would have made me take a closer look at the roof. Long term, this does not matter. It's going to shake out over the 30, 40, 50 years that we own this property, but nonetheless, it's a tough pill to swallow. Now, the roof does not leak. This top layer is still doing its job, but that was a tough pill to swallow. And then, Al, the second mistake that I made is I accidentally agreed to buy a property for about $5,000 more than I expected it to. So, sorry, I just had a bunch of stuff pop up on my screen. So I remember exactly where I was when the realtor sent me the text confirming the details of the contract. And I had 3 beautiful, phenomenal kiddos jumping over me. And I did not read the confirmation text or the contract appropriately. There was a miscommunication somewhere along the lines. I agreed to buy the property for $50,000 from the text message and the contract. However, in my head and in previous texts, I thought that I made it clear that I only wanted to offer $45,000. So again, I'm not mad at the realtor. I'm not mad at anybody but myself. And ultimately, long term, it's all going to pan out. And $5,000 over the course of a 20, 30-year loan really isn't that great. I mean, isn't that big of a deal. But in the short term, those are the issues and the biggest failures that I've done so far. So, informal board of directors, you get that, and then you run all of your big decisions through them, and then your biggest failures are going to be the harebrained things that you do, like the things that I just described. Have you sold any property due to change in the market? No. Lewis Porter Jr., my goal is to own a big portfolio of properties. I have made a vow to myself to never do anything that only pays me once. So we have not sold any properties because that would be something that only pays us once. We have not flipped any properties. All of our properties are going to be rentals for the long term. Now, I am open to doing something like selling a package of properties in order to buy more properties, but I think the chances of that ever happening are pretty slim. As my brother and I do the math, if capital is not an issue, how do I want to say this? Like this firehouse, it's probably going to be worth about 110 to 115,000, and we're only going to have $45,000, $50,000 into it. We could sell it for 110, 115,000, and we would have some quick cash in our pockets, but then we'd have to pay taxes on that, and we would no longer have that property. Now, yes, we could use the proceeds from that to acquire other properties, or if we refinance the property, pulled all of our original money out plus some extra money, that would not be a taxable event because it is a refinance and it is debt that we're pulling out of the property, not proceeds or profit. So there's no capital gains there, no taxable event whatsoever. And in addition to that, we would get the $1,200 per month that it would be for rental. So if you don't need the extra couple of grand and you are in the business of having rental properties, then it doesn't make sense to flip or sell properties unless you want to consolidate or get something larger. So if for some reason something in the market happened where we would want to sell our single family portfolio, and Lewis Porter Jr., you ask me about this all the time, and get into like apartment complexes or multifamilies, that might make sense if that was something that we wanted to do. But we haven't yet been interested in something to do that. Do you have any incentives you offer residents to encourage timely payments? Not getting evicted. I'm just kidding. No. Nope. We're actually pretty laid back as far as being timely goes. I mean, we are about, man, see, this is why it would be awesome to have Will on here. No, we don't have any incentives. Waiting on that firehouse. Yeah. So to avoid constant CapEx, do you recommend not buying super old properties? I recommend not buying dated or worn out properties. I've got a few properties that were built in the 1800s that are maintained phenomenally and have recently been renovated. So in order to avoid constant capital expenditures, the only thing that I know how to do is to front load those. And when I say front load your capital expenditures, I mean when you buy a property, go ahead, replace the mechanicals, put a new kitchen, put a new bath in it, put a new roof on it. And then all you have is the wear and tear that the residents may cause. That's the only thing I know about. How'd you find them? Like internet and reviews? No, man. Those were people that I actually, well, okay. So one of them was a referral from a friend. Both of them were referrals from friends. But one of them is my fault. I knew it was a mistake going into it. And optimism got the better of me. What is your greatest worry in investing? The process of investing? I think my greatest worry is letting my investors down. I think the private investors that we have, the people that have helped us build this portfolio, um, my greatest worry is to not be able to do the things that I said that I was going to do. So, um, I mitigate that by showing up every day, putting systems in place, taking good care of the actual underlying assets. So we don't believe in deferred maintenance. We fix everything as things need to be fixed. And we are really nice to our residents and, try to find the win-win scenarios. So we work with people pretty regularly if they find that they're not able to pay. There are so many programs out there to help people that can't pay with their rent, especially now in Corona times. So, yeah, I mean, especially the way that our business model works, where we are borrowing a lot of money at like 10 and 12%. Yeah, I mean, people are putting a lot of faith in us to make those payments and take care of the underlying assets. So that's how we mitigate it. We like your rambling. That's right. That's what I'm talking about. See, all we need is 100 people that like my rambling. You know what, though? I say that. I say that. You guys are the best. Uh, all 20 of you, all 18. I have found that there are regularly about 18 people on these live streams. And then when I dip down to about 13, 14, I know that other people just had to go, fetch for their like real life things that they've got going on. I don't have one. I think my dream 1031 exchange is to never be in the position to make one. I know you're not supposed to get attached to the properties that you purchase, but I am very much so emotionally attached to all of the properties that I own. They're like cute little kittens that are in one big cardboard box, right? How can you pick? I want all of them forever, and I want them to stay cute little kittens forever. I don't want them to grow up into cats. So that's my goal, Lewis Porter Jr., is to keep all of my rental properties and I's relationship the same as one would look at a box full of kittens. And I don't want any of my rental properties to turn into cats that do things like, claw up your carpet and bring squirrels or dead rats into the house. That's what I don't want. I just want these properties to be the twinkle in my eye forever. And I think I'm going to achieve this because a lot of the properties that we purchased are in the same area. We're very much so concentrated in one area, one quadrant of one zip code. And one of the best feelings is being able to get out on foot and walk around and just go door to door to tons of properties. And each time you round a corner to find a new property that you own. Man, I think my phone keeps popping up all this nonsense because my phone is plugged into my computer. Distracted me from your comments. Do you run your own marketing for deals or just use your networking wholesaler? I don't have one wholesaler, Ariane. And I don't run any marketing. It's really just word of mouth. I mean, I think once you say that you're going to buy a property, and you know what? I say this. I've got an unintentional marketing campaign that I do, and that is that each time a property is on the MLS and I'm interested in purchasing it, I contact the listing agent. I do not use a realtor that I have a previous strong relationship with, and this is not something that any of the realtors that I've ever dealt with before appreciate about me. But I will reach out to the listing realtor. And the reason for that is I kind of feel like I've done enough of these transactions to not get taken advantage of. So I don't necessarily need someone to fend for me. I'm familiar enough with the process, so I don't need someone to walk me through it. And I say this after I just told you guys that I signed a contract for $5,000 more than I meant to pay. But that's my fault. That has nothing to do with a realtor. And each time I purchase a property from a realtor, I do my best to stay in touch with them and regularly have them send me additional properties, albeit on or off market. So I think if we were to get a lump sum of $5 million, you know what? Let's not be so audacious. If I got a lump sum for $1 to $5 million and I needed to deploy it within a specific time frame, I think I would be very intentional about creating marketing efforts inside of that community that I'm speaking of, and I would maybe even go door to door trying to convince people to sell me their homes. I'm just talking out loud. What would you do if you had 30K in a very high priced market? I would move. That's exactly what that's exactly what happened to me back in 2017. I was in North Carolina, and man, you can hardly buy a condemned home for less than $100,000. And man, look at me now. 3 years later, we have about 80 plus properties just because we moved to a lower priced market. So if I had $30,000 in a very high priced market, I would take my $30,000 and live in a place that made me feel like $30,000 was a boatload of cash. That's exactly what I would do, and that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly what some of you guys are doing, moving. What do you think is the best way to start buying property with zero capital? I don't think there is a best way to buy property with zero capital. That's so scary. I mean, and I get it. In order to be uber successful, you have to take on an extraordinary amount of risk because that's just the name of the game. But zero capital. So here's my issue with zero capital. Everybody has zero capital for a reason. Now, some of those are extraordinarily justified reasons. Like, what was it last week on the live stream? Some phenomenal person asked me a similar question. And then I don't think I used my words as good as I should have. And I was just saying, well, the first thing we want to do is look at why you don't have any money. And of course, unfortunately, her husband was ill for quite some time and then ultimately passed away. So that made me feel bad. But, and you know, there are phenomenal reasons for not having any money. But that is an easily fixable issue if you put time, energy, and effort into educating yourself on how to fix that issue. So money is predictable. Money is not something that like some people have and some people don't. It is something that you kind of receive as a reward for providing a greater amount of value to society. So generally in the capitalistic framework that we live in, your net worth is equivalent to how much value you provide society. Now, there are tons of asterisks that have to be fleshed out behind that because being a phenomenal mother is a huge value to society that is not rewarded financially. Being a police officer or firefighter or any sort of public servant, phenomenal value to society, not appropriately rewarded. So there's this vortex of ways that you could be an extraordinarily phenomenal human, but not be appropriately rewarded. But on the other hand of that, on the other side of that is, hundreds of thousands of ways to make a great deal of money. So if you have zero capital, I wouldn't recommend getting started in real estate investing because it's just too risky. So like, let's say you got a home run of a deal. Let's say you got $1 million home for $0 down. What are you going to do when that $1 million home needs a $30,000 roof? Chances are you got the $1 million home close to 100% leverage. So where's the 30 grand going to come from? I don't know. And so then what are you going to do? Have a distressed $1 million home? Have a leaky roof on such a nice home? So the only way to be successful in real estate, starting with zero capital, is to constantly be borrowing until you whip up enough assets and cash flow in order for the income to start accumulating faster than you are accumulating the debt. But the entire time that you're doing that, if anything goes wrong and you don't have another sort of source of income or capital, then you are constantly exposed to having yourself in a mountain of debt with no feasible way of paying it off. And similar to whatever I said earlier, where I could not in good faith advise someone to do something, I would never say, oh, you have zero capital. Have you considered real estate investing? Those words will never be uttered out of my mouth. We enjoy the rants. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. So zero capital, my answer to that is figure out something else that you can do to the world to start generating tons of income. I mean, that's what I did with this insurance agency, right? Like, I really wanted to get involved in real estate investing. I kind of realized that I had a life insurance license at the time, but because I was learning about insurance and I wanted to get started in real estate investing, I realized that real estate investors had a really tough time with their insurance policies. So then I started learning about how to fix that issue and tried to fix it for as many investors as I possibly could. And now I have, an insurance agency that pays for all of my monthly expenses that is largely focused around providing property and casualty insurance to real estate investors. So I got super focused on providing a service to the people that I wanted to get closer to and learn from in order to do better at real estate investing. And I should also say that my whole point of getting started in life insurance is because of the amount of capital that it could generate. So when I was, really getting after it in life insurance sales, I think my best month was like $20,000 of income that I made in life insurance sales. I didn't like it because of the way that you have to operate. It was kind of outside of my wheelhouse, but yeah, I wouldn't. All that to say, I'm going to circle right back and say, if you got zero capital, don't get into real estate investing. You're kind of setting yourself up for failure. If you get into real estate investing and you have zero capital, you better work your face off in order to mitigate any of the risks that come your way. And I mean, like, you have to be honest with how much exposure you're creating for yourself. You have to be honest about the downside and anything that you could possibly do to mitigate that, to make more money, to handle issues yourself. You have to be willing to do that, because there's just not going to be any skin on the bone until enough time passes. Because, just like being in the stock market is such a horrible example. The 4 ways to make money in real estate investing: appreciation, the tax benefits, principal pay down, and the cash flow. So the cash flow is never going to be enough to pay for the capital expenditures. Never. The appreciation is something that you're never going to realize in your bank account until you refinance. The principal pay down, well, you have to somehow get a individual to give you a loan that's amortized or meet the bank's qualifications in order to experience that. And the tax benefits really don't matter, because you're not going to pay taxes if you got zero capital and zero income. That one is complete. That tangent and rant is complete. All right. So post your questions in the chat if you have any, or has this ran its course? Let's see how many people are watching. We got 16 people watching and no questions coming in. All right, let me hop on over to YouTube real quick to see if there are anything that's going on that I cannot see yet. Nope. What do you say? Are we done here? Are we done here for this week? Did everybody get what they came for? Oh. Yes, I do. When we first started, we did a few partnerships. We really don't do them anymore. And when we, so it's almost, so everything that I have been mentioning about not having any capital, and not wanting to have a real estate portfolio with less than 10 properties. If you're going to do a joint venture with someone, the goal should be getting to more than 10 properties as quickly as possible. Because if you don't, then it's going to be that same thing that I mentioned earlier that my brother and I did, is at the end of every month, you just have to figure out how much money you have to put in order to keep everything afloat. So I think 10 properties is kind of the arbitrary breaking point that I've just kind of experienced. But again, I don't know how well I've actually experienced that, since we went from 8 to 21 properties. So before I would do a kind of joint venture with someone, I would want to be very clear about the expectations of getting to more than 10 properties. And then also, just kind of at the point that we're at the moment, we're not necessarily looking for partnerships for like capital's sake. So there would have to be something in it for us as well. So the ones that we have done recently, we have put in zero capital. The out-of-state individual puts in 100% of the capital, and the ownership is still 50-50. So yeah, see, and you know what, Lewis Porter Jr., this is what I wish more people were open about. And I think when you look at Bigger Pockets and they're like, oh, I'm 20 and I've got 8 properties and now I'm retired. It's like, come on, man, stop selling that. That's not true. You're not retired. You're finding people nice enough to give you money when you don't deserve it to keep these properties afloat. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Great answer, Ryan. Yeah. Structure 50-50 on everything. So the equity and the profit. Yeah. So essentially we're 100% is what the other person puts up for 50% of the profit and equity. Pretty crazy, right? It's a good deal for me. It's good to see you, Switch Dad TV. I miss you, man. It's like yesterday we were running around that track. All right. Lewis Porter Jr., Arion, 3D of Tom, Brown Sugar, Tech J. Are you still on here, Tech J, or did I run you off with my answer? Let me know. And then Joseph Wilson never got back with us earlier on how his property's going, but he shared a few weeks ago that he has purchased a property. So that's cool. All right. Well, yeah, man, I appreciate you guys showing up. You guys are awesome. So I'm going to give it just a few more awkward seconds to see if anybody wants to throw in some last minute questions. I'm positive that some people are just being flies on the wall, but don't want to ask their question yet because it might sound silly. But there are no silly questions, especially not here on Ryan Ingram's YouTube channel on his Friday morning live stream. Thank you. Yeah, Ariane. See, look. Your questions are welcome here. They are permitted. They are permitted. All right. No questions. I'm going to give it one more minute, though. Just bask in this awkward silence. I created this banner for a while because I had these dreams of like getting a super chat. Look at that. Likes, subscribes, and super chats are appreciated. But in this format, super chats aren't really even necessary. Super chats, if you're not familiar, are when you click the little button with the money sign in it and send me $1 or $2 to answer your question. But the only time I've seen YouTubers be successful in getting these is when their chat is just absolutely overflowing with questions. And in order to even be seen, you have to leave those because when you do a super chat, it kind of freezes your question at the top of the screen for a while. So just the current setup that I have, man, it's kind of like modern day panhandling. We'll answer questions for super chats. That should be, I should get a cardboard thing. And that's probably insensitive. I'm going to stop ranting while I haven't vented out. I'm going to put my filter back on. Congratulations on the baby. Yeah, man. Thank you. Talk with you soon. I'll talk to you soon, Tom. All right. We'll super chat. We'll answer questions for super chats. That's funny. I'm hilarious. All right. I will see you all next week at 8 a.m. on Friday, Eastern time. Enjoy a week. Enjoy your weekend, and buy a property. Or buy 10 properties. That's what you should do, Lewis Porter Jr. You should buy 5 properties so that you're at 10. That's your homework. By Monday, let me know. Oh, man. What a bummer. Outbid. Still looking for the first deal. You got it, man. Hey, you took the first step. At least you showed up to that sheriff sale. So now it's just a matter of getting the right one. All righty. I will see you guys next week.